Hello class, and welcome to my video reflection on the importance of listening. My name is Thomas Griswold, and this will be my presentation. So, after watching the Rack 2 videos, I learned that the most powerful thing that you can do in a conversation and communication is listening. Also, ironically, the less you say, the more people will listen. And it makes sense because for those that talk too much, you tend to just want to block those people out. And you might think that they're a know-it-all, etc. Listening to someone's side entirely so that you can respond and be heard completely is also another idea that I did not consider before. And then from the other video, just a fun tidbit that many leaders only listen for about 18 seconds, which really isn't enough time to absorb someone else's points of view. And it led me to ask the question, well, what is listening, and am I a good listener? So in communication, listening is integral towards building good relationships, personal and professional alike. And people that choose not to assertively listen oftentimes create clash and not solutions. So, how to be a good listener? Well, you need to identify what are the blocks of listening so you can listen better. There are 12 types of listening blocks: mind reading, rehearsing, filtering, judging, daydreaming, advising, sparring, being right, derailing, placating, comparing, and identifying. So mind reading is, I will try to use the example of parent and child for this so that it's easily able to relate to. When you're mind reading, you're already assuming what the other person is going to say. And it's a block because you're not actually listening to the child. Presuming what they will say. So the child doesn't want to do his chores. And that's all someone like the parent would hear. Rehearsing, already talking whenever someone is talking to you. And it makes sense that that's a block. Constructing the next piece of your argument before even listening. Filtering is whenever you hear the child say, yes, I will do the chores, but filtering out the parts that you don't want to hear because the chores would be dangerous, the chores would be hard to do, there's no gas in the lawnmower, etc. Judging, the next, is already assuming what someone like the child is trying to get out of. Daydreaming, I'll use a personal example. Daydreaming oftentimes is whenever you say something that triggers a different event in your mind. Advising, something that parents would often do with their child when they're just trying to get their point across. And sometimes it can be unsolicited, and parents are trying to help throughout their experience but not really listening. Sparring, that's pretty self-explanatory. Being right, I'm sure that this happens a lot with parents and children. And it is more important to be right than to actually listen is the source of that. Derailing, just switching subjects, trying to get off balance. Not really staying focused to the point at hand. Placating, also something that parents may do to their child if they just want to give up, get over with the conversation, to complaining. Next one, comparing and identifying. And I'll put these kind of almost in the same category. Comparing would be whenever you're trying to be better than the other person and you're already not listening to them because you think that they're smarter or you think that you're smarter. And identifying is whenever you try to connect to someone like your child and say, well, this happened to me, this is how I fixed it, but oftentimes it's not exactly helping that person in that situation. So it is another way, and it's kind of it can be similar to derailing. And this is all according to Pantazzi in her article about the 12 blocks of listening. So now that you've identified your listening blocks, it is good to take a good look at yourself and say, okay, I definitely have some of those blocks. I definitely do that. What can I do to do better? So my listening blocks are rehearsing, mind reading, being right, daydreaming. And I'll give some personal examples of those. So rehearsing, I am a commissioned officer in the Air Force, and a lot of times I am being questioned or I'm on defense. So unless I know that I'm wrong, I am guilty of trying to think of a counter argument before listening to others. If I work with someone like my boss or my boss's boss enough, I can just go ahead and assume what they're thinking. And it's not helping me into thinking about what they're actually trying to say. Being right, depending on the context of a situation, sometimes it's more important for me to be right, and even though I'm wrong. Daydreaming, this happens to me a lot in mass briefings that I'm not leading. So I try to take notes in meetings to be more attentive. So I asked my boss, my peers, and my subordinate about areas of improvement for my listening skills. So it's no surprise that my boss thought that I was a very good listener, given the circumstance that she is my boss. So the feedback that she gave me was that I respond very well to carrying out tasks in a timely manner. I take very attentive notes, and I take details, and I pretty much carry out tasks on time. A lot of times it's a one-way conversation with her, so I don't really interrupt her unless she specifically asks me for my advice or my input. She did notice that whenever I brief with the audience of higher rank that I get nervous, and it's a lot different than at the squadron whenever I am briefing something that's my own program. But listening is something that I do well, that she noticed, because I take a lot of notes. And like I said before, that is my way to try to be a good listener. I asked my peer, another young CGO, about how I am listening. And he said, well, a lot of times we don't really work together on stuff, we just vent to each other. But according to Jonesburg, this is also something very good because it's a healthy way of expelling intense emotions that are bottled up and damaging human psyche physically or emotionally or mentally. Something that I learned about keeping things bottled up is it can affect your cholesterol, it can create ulcers, and it can affect your sleep patterns. My peer also said that sometimes I give unsolicited advice and I interrupt whenever all they need to do is vent. And something that I also learned is venting can also lead to gossiping, which I can definitely see points of time where gossiping can create dissent in the ranks and create a harmful relationship with my boss or my boss's boss or just other people in my squadron leadership. My peer noticed that I do pretty good at the squadron level, like my boss noticed, when I'm briefing my own programs that I'm comfortable with. Lastly, I asked my subordinate how I am at listening, and their viewpoint was that I clearly listen to them before making decisions. And Bombardner said that employees that are listened to are more likely to speak up in the workplace. A study from Achievers shows that 87% of workers feel disengaged in the workplace because they don't have a voice. So it was in line. My subordinate was in line with that. And he said that he felt like he had a safe place to work. And that's why he didn't mind bringing up suggestions to me whenever he felt I was going down the wrong path. My subordinate noticed that occasionally I do interrupt. Sometimes I give unsolicited advice, but also said that most of the time that I'm right. In briefing, his observations are limited because I would only brief the team, and I would brief the team briefly, but it was good because they felt like it was a safe place to talk and bring up suggestions. Listening to all sides for employee viewpoints is important in active listening and allowing action to be taken further. Bombardner, 2018. This is my works cited, and this is the end of my presentation. Thank you.